Okay, everyone, welcome to the Education, Social Mobility and Justice session, TRAS. I am the chair. My name is Ian Bill. I'm a lecturer in work and organisations here. And we've got four great talks. Alison's going to kick us off with a talk on decolonising and diversifying a quantitative networks module. Then we've got Ifeoma online. She's going to talk to us about transformative multicultural pedagogies for addressing inequalities. Further, Hardeep and Zara on decolonising the university. And then last but not least, Emma on increasing employability skills within entrepreneurship. Time's quite tight, so come in, please, and settle in. Each presenter's got 20 minutes and 10 minutes for questions. I'm going to give each presenter a 5-minute and 2-minute warning. So without further ado, over to the wonderful Alison.
Thanks. Hi, my name's Alison. I'm I'm a lecturer in work psychology education, and I'm going to be talking. Actually, do I need to stand in front of the microphone? Or is it right?
As close to the microphone as possible, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird room to talk in because it's very long. But I'm going to be talking today about a project that I've been working on the last year, which is decolonising and diversifying methods teaching, and with a view to sort of establishing processes more widely across business education. So I'm going to just talk about a very small part of that project, but if you do have questions about the wider project, obviously happy to take them at the end. I wanted to just acknowledge all the various people who've been working on this project. So we have a huge number of student research assistants. 2 of them are in this room today. And we call them our inclusivity champions. We've also had a number of colleagues who've contributed in different ways, and a number of different funds that have contributed to this project. So as a background, I teach primarily quantitative research methods. I have learned it's the kind of teaching you sort of fall into because it tends to get given to new staff who maybe don't know any better and don't say no, but actually I quite enjoy it. So I teach a number of different modules, but the one that I was focusing on in this project was a second-year core module for our BSc Business Management and BSc International Management students. So they're kind of the largest cohort in our business school. And students choose the module in that they have to choose between either quant or qual. So typically their choice is that they liked the sound of my module slightly more than doing qualitative research. And there's quite a broad range of maybe motivations from students, and also really broad sort of disciplinary backgrounds. So the business school is quite interdisciplinary, but students enter with quite a range of different high school qualifications. So I've got some in my class who might have done psychology or statistics A-level. I've got some who will literally come into the class and ask me to explain to them what a mean is. So I've got to kind of take these students and get them all to the point of being able to master regression, because this is like a feeder module into some of our more advanced modules in the 3rd year. I teach them a range of statistical tests as well. And I first kind of got involved in decolonising when Minji, my co-author, she teaches qualitative methods, and we were both just talking together about we wanted to improve our modules because her module also struggles with student engagement and motivation. And she said, oh, I'm really interested in decolonisation. And I thought at the time, well, that sounds interesting, but I don't really know what it is. So I went and kind of looked it up, and that started my journey, I guess. But I think more broadly, in business schools as a whole, in academia as a whole, the knowledge that we teach and we communicate to students is predominantly from quite a narrow Western framework. And research methods feed into all of that because they are the vehicle by which knowledge is produced and goes on to be distributed in academic journals. And we typically treat these methods as neutral and objective in that there's a sort of standard that we are expected to carry out the methods to, and that standard is not really questioned or unpicked or rooted in any kind of historical context when perhaps it should be. So that was kind of the goal of the project, to try and take a more critical approach to that and encourage students to take a more critical approach as well. Because we can't claim to teach global business, as we do claim that in our business school, and I'm sure many others do. We can't claim to do that if we're only teaching a very narrow approach to global business. Additionally, our student cohort is really diverse. We have about 75% international students, and you know, there's an emphasis on wanting content to reflect their lived experience as well, which is quite different to my lived experience, for example. So one of the first things we did in the project was we spent quite a bit of time defining decolonization and diversification. And I would say, in terms of if you're interested in carrying out similar projects, I think that's an important first step in terms of sort of understanding what those terms mean, but also how you're going to define the terms in the context of the project. I won't spend too long on it because I do want to get on to what we actually did, but I thought it would be good to have a quote from Sally Everett, you know, very suitable for this event. So this is from an article she wrote, and I think it summarizes decolonization and diversification quite well. So decolonization is it's really something about taking things apart. So the way we understand knowledge, the way we understand business theory and so on, it's about dismantling those. Diversification is much more about broadening, so bringing in new or different perspectives. And we conceptualize those two things as being connected to one another, but also quite distinct. And they're both elements of inclusive education, but inclusive education also focuses on other things that are not decolonization or diversification. So that was how we kind of rooted our project, but we also set up some principles as well that we wanted to sort of guide what we're doing. The first of those was about our own reflexivity and positionality. So obviously I'm white, and I think there's debate in the literature as to the extent to which white people should be engaging in this activity or leading these activities. And I suppose, you know, I completely respect those opinions. And I think I wanted to position myself very much as a learner in the process. This is why we drew so heavily on student voice, which was one of our other principles. So we had quite a range of students who contributed, and also a range of other academics who contributed. The other thing we did was we conceptualized decolonization as being ongoing. So it's not like a one and done, and we're continuing the project in various iterations. And then the final thing, we were trying to disrupt what's traditionally considered good research. So we did collect a lot of data for this project, but it sort of was data in various forms because we let the students decide how they wanted to collect the data and go and do it as they wanted to. So we sort of had a goal of you know, they were collecting views on inclusive education, or they were collecting sort of evaluation, but they could decide how they did that, you know, and lots of them just like WhatsApped people, or, you know, some of them made surveys and some of them just had casual conversations with friends and so on. So we were trying to disrupt this idea of what we consider to be good research or not. And with our inclusivity champions, we decided then this was how they defined decolonization. So we did some focus groups for them. Thank you. And then they went and asked a lot of their peers their opinions, and then we all came back and they decided these were the areas they wanted to focus on. So content diversity and inclusive teaching practices. That second area was actually quite surprising to myself and to Minji. We thought they'd be coming in saying, can you know, dismantle what is good research, but actually they weren't really interested in that. They wanted the classroom to feel inclusive. They wanted a lot more interaction in the activities. They wanted support to be really consistent across their modules, but also within a module as well. So we tried to implement a lot of changes relating to that. One of my inclusivity champions, she was very insistent with quant. She kept saying it to me over and over again that she wanted students to come into the classroom, and when they left, they would say, wow, I didn't know that data could be used to do that. And not in a good way, by the way. It wasn't like, oh, wow, this graph is so cool. It was like, wow, this quantitative data has totally manipulated our understanding. And I thought, well, I'm not sure bringing in more case studies from the Global South or having more interaction is going to cut it with that kind of idea. So I went digging for something that was a bit more disruptive and perhaps in the I guess, in the vein of the decolonization element rather than the diversification element. And I came across quant crit. So actually, some of you, depending on what your disciplinary background is, you might already be familiar with this. But in business, this has not already been used. So it came out of educational research, and it's based on critical race theory. So the idea that racism is not just individuals being discriminatory, it is built into our systems and our structures and our way of life. And in business, it's built into the way that organizations function. And in academia and in teaching research methods, it's built into the way in which our institutions operate and communicate knowledge. So in 2018, the journal Race, Education and Equity published a special issue on quant crit. So it was critical race theory. It sort of originated in qualitative research, and it was taking this idea and trying to apply it to quantitative research. And the Gilborn and his co-authors came up with this framework, which is a way of understanding quantitative research within the context of critical race theory. So the first idea is the centrality of racism, which I've kind of touched on already. That it's not, I should say as well, critical race theory is not just about race, it's also about other forms of inequality as well that are systemic. And there are various offshoots of that too. So it's this idea that inequality is embedded in everything, and it's also embedded in our research processes in terms of the type of knowledge we prioritize, the type of methods we prioritize, and so on. And within the quantitative research context, numbers are not neutral, right? So there's a tendency, especially I think in kind of the news and so on, to say, well, these are the statistics, and that is it. The statistics say this, and therefore that is truth. But actually, every part of the journey of producing research is a choice, right? So it's made up of hundreds, maybe thousands of choices by researchers to, which variables to use, how to operationalize those, what methods to use, and so on, and how that's interpreted. And we should communicate that in the way that we produce research. The third idea is that categories are not natural. So categories are also a choice. The way that for the UK sort of census is a good example, because presumably most of us in this room might have completed it a couple of years ago. The way that they've operationalized, say, ethnicity in that census is a choice. If you go to another country and complete a social survey in that country, it will be operationalized differently. The categories will be different. So, those are shaped by particular agendas. The fourth point is that data can't speak for itself. It has to be interpreted, it has to be, and that interpretation process reflects decisions that say something about the researcher themselves. And then the final idea is that research can't be apolitical, so therefore it should be used to dismantle structural inequality. And Gilborn and colleagues feel that quantitative research should always be used for social justice purposes. So I kind of took this, and they're really writing more about research, but I wanted to apply it to research methods teaching. So I put it into the module in two ways. One was that I explicitly taught students about it, and the second way was I tried to embed it into the other materials as well. So here, the way that I explicitly taught students about it was that in the second half of the module, they have to do a group research project, and so are creating research themselves. And normally I just teach them, this is how you design the survey measures and so on, and get them to go and design survey measures. This time I said, okay, this is how you design survey measures, and now this is the framework about how research design can actually be sort of perpetrating systemic inequalities. So I introduced them to that framework, and then I got them to do a number of different activities relating to it. So the first was that I got them to write their own positionality statements as they approached the research project. The topic of the research project was the student experience, so that each group had to pick something related to the student experience. So I got them to think about, and they submit tutorial assignments every week. So that was their tutorial assignment, to discuss their own positionality and then submit a statement about their own positionality. And I gave them my positionality to start with, to give them sort of examples of what they could say as well. The second the second thing we did was we focused on asset-based research design. So here's an example of that. Basically, the way that you frame a research question then impacts what data you collect about that research and sort of the implicit assumptions around that research. So in business, an example of a deficit model is saying, why don't more women and people from global majority backgrounds apply for leadership positions in our company? The implication there is there's something that's deficit in those groups of people that makes them not apply for leadership positions. And then, from that question, you pick variables that might also measure that, things like confidence and so on. An asset-based model would flip it to say, why are leadership positions in our company less accessible to those types of people? And framing research in that way is going to then impact the variables that you might gather data on to focus more on systemic problems like, the support that's provided, the culture and things like that. So I gave this example to students, and then I got them to think about psychological well-being of students as a dependent variable, and think about how can you frame a question that focuses on, there's a problem in the individual that's leading to their poor psychological well-being, or, some of the systemic issues in universities that might lead to students having poor psychological well-being, and they had to sort of submit it on an anonymous group forum. And one of them, of course, said, lecturers giving our students group projects to do is contributing to our poor psychological well-being. So there you go. And then the other thing I got them to do was that in the survey, basically they all write a few questions and they all send their questions to me, and I put it into one big survey for them. And I add some extra questions that people are interested in general, including demographics. So the categorizations for those I'd got from, I think one was from Qualtrics and one was from like a government survey or whatever. And I hadn't really critically evaluated those at all. So once I learned about Quant Crit, I thought, I should change them. And then I thought, no, I'm gonna give them to the students as they are, and I'm gonna get them to evaluate them for me. So they reviewed all of my categorizations and gave me some feedback about what I should change. So here are some of the examples of feedback they gave me. Because I think for ethnicity, I'd use the UK thing, and it just has Arab. It doesn't have a Middle Eastern category. And a lot of our students are from that area of the world, and a lot of them had quite strong opinions about categorization there. Another one was, some of them pointed out, well, you've got some member states, but not other member states. So you need to be consistent. And why don't you look at the UN list and take it from that? Mostly, I already had a third gender categorization, but so one student said you should remove it, but another student said actually it's, as you can see from the quote here, that they didn't quite understand it. So that was an interesting piece of feedback, and I put in the question itself, I put an explanation of what it meant for students who weren't clear about that as well. I then in the end of module exam, part of the questions are on the group project. Each student answers individually. I asked them about Quant Crit there to see how much the learning had been embedded. I would say it wasn't embedded quite as well as I was hoping it would be embedded. But that's an area to improve for next year. But some students gave really in-depth, really nuanced responses, which was actually really nice to read. I also embedded Quant Crit across the module. So here are the different ways. The first one, actually, this is my favorite thing that I did. And if every person who teaches quantitative research methods could do this, I think it would be amazing. So we don't typically teach the history of quantitative research methods. At a more simplistic level, things like positivism, we don't typically teach that. But also what I discovered, and I hadn't realized before, despite learning statistics in 3 different elite institutions in the UK, was that the founding fathers of the statistical tests we teach our students, so correlation, regression, ANOVA, etc., they were all eugenicists. And they developed a lot of these tests to promote the eugenics movement. Yeah, crazy, right? So I decided that I would at least, I think there were bigger issues here, but I thought a first step is at least to communicate that to students when we're teaching these tests. So I added in an extra kind of part of the lecture that introduced this idea. The other elements, I'm running out of time, so I'll just flip through them, but we added in more criticality about research processes. I also added in a section about reporting statistics. So part of that was that students want a very clear template as to how they're supposed to do it. But then I also used that as an opportunity to talk about framing of data and how the way that you're telling a story when you're communicating data outputs, the way you tell that story is going to influence what your audience hears. I added a new case study about an organization that was reporting bias. And they sort of were trying to minimize the findings to make themselves seem better. But I didn't tell the students that. Obviously, I just gave them questions to get them to reflect on that. And then I tried to diversify the reading list. It's really, really difficult to diversify the reading list in quantitative research methods, but I did add sort of a broader range of text from different resources. We also did some evaluation. And I think what I learned is that I would say overall the findings were mixed in terms of our evaluation, in that some students, like this student here, they really kind of, I guess, took away from the module the key message that I was hoping they would. But equally, this is some other students' answers to the same question, like what was your main takeaway from the module? And a lot of them were still very, very focused on the technical part, or the technical kind of skills. And I think there's, within the business school, there's a real workplace output, right? They want to learn skills that they can use in the workplace. The final quote I thought was interesting, because actually the student said, I would prefer for the module to be more quantitative. And this was like an open-ended survey question. I'm just wondering what this student means, because I mean, we were only teaching quantitative methods. So I guess I'm assuming from that perhaps they find all the kind of criticality and reporting a little bit of a distraction from what they wanted the core message of the module to be. And I think what we found is that what students think of as inclusive education is not necessarily what we think of as inclusive education. And this student here says they don't understand how a module couldn't be inclusive. So I guess, you know, they're looking for fair treatment. They're looking for maybe a diversity of voices, which students said they find in our module, but they're not necessarily looking for sort of a reimagining of the dominant frameworks of knowing, let's just say. I'll just skip through these slides. And oh yeah, this is my final reflection. I guess, so it's great that there are lots of individual educators engaging in decolonization, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't be doing that, but I think decolonization is a broader task. So institutions need to support it, I think, meaningfully. And I think as an academic community, there's an issue that we still talk about the Pearson product moment correlation coefficient, when Carl Pearson was a professor of eugenics and leader of the eugenics movement in the UK. I think it's a problem that we use the F statistic routinely. F stands for Fisher, and Fisher was the successor of Pearson. I think it's a problem that Andy Field talks about these guys as being amazing, the most intelligent men to ever walk the face of the earth, and doesn't talk about some of the other stuff they did. Yeah, but that's a bigger problem to solve. We're continuing with our project. If you want, you can come along to a workshop we're organising, which is about decolonising the curriculum. It's here on the 10th of July, and it's free. And yeah, happy to take any questions that you have about our project.
Okay, we've got 5 or 6 minutes for questions. Do we have any? I've got a great idea.
Your presentation. You talked about you getting the students to write positionality statements. I was wondering if that posed any challenges, especially in the context of a lot of your students, international students, child labour by what positionality might be
Yeah, I think so. So I started off by just giving them my positionality to give them some ideas. And I did find in what they submitted, a lot of them had like taken what I'd done and just applied it to themselves. So which is fine. But the other thing I didn't want them to do was I didn't want them to feel compelled to share anything. Either it was an individual submission, but you know, that I would potentially see, or even just in their conversations that they wouldn't feel comfortable sharing. So I sort of said, you can talk about your own identities, but also, even if you don't want to do that, you can talk about, you know, what are your views on this topic? What are some of the assumptions you have about because the topic was the student experience, about what makes a good student experience. And so that's an element of positionality, that it doesn't involve them saying, oh, you know, I'm from this place and I'm straight and I'm whatever. So yeah, that's.
That just formed.
Yeah, so we have a different, we have a sort of a small participation grade every week that they submit something and they get participation. This is purely to get students to come to class. But so we put it as part of that basically. And they also did it in kind of group discussions as well, like in sort of just during the talk sessions.
Okay, should we go over here and then over here?
Hi.
Thanks. So I've come across script before. I just wondered if, when you were searching for a framework, you considered others, or if you found anything else. To go with.
I did not. Well, I looked quite a lot. I mean, if you go and search for decolonizing research methods, right? If you just do a standard search, like 95 to 99% of the results will all be to do with qualitative methods. So I came across the quant one and I was like, great, thank God. Yeah, so I didn't really consider anything beyond that. Do you have any recommendations?
No, yeah. Sorry, and just one second. What in their learning journey you do?
Yeah, so that's a good question, actually, because I think this is a challenge with decolonizing core content. You have to first teach the content before you dismantle it. I taught it explicitly in week 6, so halfway through the term. But some of the other things, like the history of statistics lecture, that was towards the beginning of term. But yeah, I didn't say here's a critical framework until at least they'd learned some of the less critical frameworks.
Okay, we've got time just for one more. I did see your hand up.
My question builds on that. Thank you for your very interesting presentation. Reflecting on your experience and the student feedback, even when you think that pluralization is really important, do you think there's a case to separate things more, such as there's a module, say second year, that really teaches them, quantitative research methods, like the technical aspect, the basic aspects, particularly as they come from their different level of understanding of these issues. In finalist years or in subsequent years, having some modules that text with more critical perspective and get them to reflect more deeply on it. So, in other words, is there a case to say that indeed introducing decolonization and the subject matter can create quite a lot of multiple learning goals that are easier for?
And I think there's definitely a tension as well between what students want to learn and what do we want to teach them. And then within that, what do we want to teach them category, I think there's definitely a tension across educators in terms of what they want to teach students. So I don't know if I have a good answer to your question, but because I guess that's a question of program design, right? And do students need to get the basics before they can understand more? And this is a more complex framework, right, than just the basics. I've always believed, before I even learned about this stuff, that criticality is essential to teaching quantitative research methods. And I sell it to business students in this way, that a small portion of them are likely to be the people actually analysing data. The rest of them are going to work in a variety of roles, right? They will come across data in their roles and they will need to know, well, how is this data being produced and are these conclusions reasonable? So I think that in itself involves some criticality, regardless of whether you take a kind of a critical race theory approach to it or not. And I think that should be foundational. But yeah, that's my view.
Okay, thanks again. Alison, sure, you can be free to take questions at the break.
Yeah.
Well.
It's here. But when you turn the camera off and I see, so you can see the room. Yeah.
Yeah, well, so she can see the room.
Hi, Ifeoma, how are you?
I'm all right. I'm just waiting for my turn.
Okay, one sec.
That's okay.
Just test your speaker.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Sorry, one sec.
I can hear you.
Yeah, just click that arrow.
Sorry, just test again. Hi, Ifeoma.
Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Friday, I thought there was another one, wasn't there?
You might just check on the Teams, like the more thing, it allows you to look at other audios.
Ah, cool. Thank you. So we need to be this one. Oh, that's the mic. Just test you again, Ifeoma. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
brilliant.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, yes.
Great.
Okay.
So we can see you. And I'm gonna.
ready to share my slide.
Great. I'm gonna turn you around so you can see the room, if that's okay.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's really nice.
Okay.
Thank you. While you're doing that, I'm sharing my slides. Yeah. It's not allowing me to share my slide. Can you enable me to share my slide, because it's not letting me do that?
Seems to think you're sharing already.
That's because I'm sharing. Any luck?
Oh, it's nearly here. I need to check whether this is the correct one, so I don't get stuck on the way. But I'm really sorry I'm away.
That's all right.
Oh my goodness, not letting me. Have you stopped sharing?
I have, yeah.
Okay, it's coming.
Yeah, there we go.
It's
Okay,
coming,
great.
it's coming. Can you see my slides?
We can.
Yeah, we can.
Thank you so much. You're good to go.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, Chloe, you blew my mind away with your presentation. Some of the things you've talked about in your presentation are the kind of ethos I follow when I teach my students, and it might align. I might not mention things like asset models or just that deep learning that you're using for your class. And I feel like if you were my teacher if you were my maths teacher, or my maths teacher was half as much as you when I was growing up, I would really love quantitative research. So hello, everyone. My name is Ifeoma Dan-Ogosi, and I'm a senior lecturer in public health at the School of Health and Social Wellbeing. I'm very thrilled to be here and very, very grateful to the iLead conference team and the Kings in your school, the business school. I sorry that I'm not able to be here today because I'm away with my daughter on a tournament, and I hope that I can still connect with everyone or anyone who is interested in my work. I have a dream to transform education from merely the didactic and traditional methods of teaching and learning to a more authentic and more participatory one that is inclusive for everyone to participate and be the best they can in, bring out their best potential. So you can say that I'm a change maker, a social justice advocate, and a positive disruptor. I want to present today on transformative multicultural pedagogies for addressing inequalities in higher education. I'm going to use my experience of teaching and learning for the last 9 years. But in the last 2 years, I've actually really got the creative space, the reflective space to actually develop it as a framework. So come with me as I express to you how I have been teaching in 9 years, and in the last 2 years, how I've developed. So this outline reflects what I'm going to be talking about today. It's structured to cover several key areas. And I wanted to say also that I teach a public health leadership module, 2 of the modules, one in undergraduate research and one in undergraduate studies and one in the master's level. And it's about training my students to actually have the leadership confidence to go out and compete in the world today and to enjoy what they do. So I'm going to talk about why I decided to go into HE teaching. Historically, I've struggled with the way I've been taught. The traditional teaching methods have really prevented me from excelling as much as I would have if I was in higher education, if I was to be taught in a different way. I felt that there was a lot of hidden curriculum and vagueness in way assessments are presented to students, presented to me particularly, and I always struggled to understand what my teachers wanted from me. And some of them were not that approachable, not because they said they were not approachable, but in the way that they presented themselves. And I found it really difficult, especially when I came to the UK to come. So I determined to transform how teaching and learning was for me, for other students. So I desired the experiential learning, the deep learning that I would have used. I'm the kind of student that likes to understand and study by myself, but also wants my teachers to be very expressive about what is required. And the compressed MSc study, beyond borders in this country and other countries, it does not allow that deep learning that I would have loved to. So I decided that if I was going to teach, and the first opportunity I had, I took it, because I said if I was going to teach my students, it would be to empower them to take control of their own learning, increase critical consciousness of what they were doing so that they can understand what they are really doing, just like Chloe has explained in different ways, and to build a global citizenship, for these students. And, it's just about bringing out the best in my students through compassion, through having joy and fun in the classroom. And I found that across the years, it has really increased the engagement with the students and me, but also with themselves as individuals. And I noticed that students think better, the critical skills, the thinking, the reading and the writing improves as I discuss with them, either one-on-one or in group sessions. I also wanted to impact on work, because when I came out from the public health course that I did, I was confused about what will I do with this public health course and this teaching, this learning I've had in these few years. And employability mattered to me at the time, with a woman with 4 children and with someone who is so, I've never not worked in my life. So getting a public health MSc degree, I wanted to do something. I wanted my students to go out and think, because all public health students come to me and what do we do? Where are we going to work? So I also wanted to encourage connection and inclusivity, and these two actually are very good for helping to reduce inequalities in education. So let's look at some of the evidence. So a culturally appropriate curriculum is very critical for creating inclusive and meaningful learning environments. We see that in a lot of people talk about this a lot these days. Short of decolonizing, but it's just something that is called cultural competence is important for learning. Understanding your students, who they are, where they come from, and how you integrate these things into your teaching matters. Also, feeling safe. Some students are too scared to learn. I was just talking about my maths. I was so scared to learn maths. I wasn't ready to listen or even and take anything, because I've been talked down. People talk to me rather than talking with me to understand what I'm doing. Also, we know how sense of belonging at university has been very, in the last couple of years, especially with the Office of Students, but by just talking about it all the time, how sense of belonging is important. And there are several authors who have also brought that up. And recently, the fact that friends and family support for coursework is important has, in my own personal experience with my sons, and also with just a new book that was written by Paul Campbell. This January was released, Grace and Assessment in Higher Education. If people who are from underrepresented groups often find it difficult to get help with assessment, and I did find that hard when I first came as an international student, but also our students who are even home students who are from socially, economically economically deprived communities also find this hard as well. So suddenly I had a light bulb in my class. I've been teaching a diverse group of people for years, but never thought of it as a multicultural classroom, or thought about how globalization is making my class or the population of students more diverse. And suddenly just dawned on me. And I just looked at my class of 65 students and said, wow, these students are different. They're from totally different communities, Australia, Canada. In my class, we have Pakistanis, we have people from Asia, all parts, India. We have all sorts of African nations represented in my class. So, and I said to myself, these students will be practicing public health in a globalized world. And this realization reshaped my perspective to teaching. So I had to add some topics like multicultural leadership. I knew that there were some people who were going through, had dyslexia or one other kind of ADHD or any kind of neurodiversity. So I put a session on that, and I put a session on gender-based related work, because there's a lot of ethnicity things like gender gap, pay gap, and all that. And I wanted my students to understand this. So the philosophies that I lean on include Paula Freire's The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which deals with students and teacher teaching each other, having experiential, breaking hierarchy between the teacher and the student, and enabling the students to have the power to challenge what they are learning, to deep dive into what they want to know, and feel free to express themselves in class. And I believe that students actually come with experience from their worlds, from either, especially my apprentices who are based in public health already or local governments and what. I want them to challenge me. I want them to teach me what I don't know in practice. And I bring that into class a lot. I give them opportunities to express themselves, to have a voice. In terms of Bell Hooks, another person that I lean on, her Teaching to Transgress Education as a Practice of Freedom book really gave me the impetus to actually develop this. Because when I was looking at multicultural classroom as a thing in 2 years ago, I didn't know anything about it. And I started to search, started to deep dive into books, into articles, and I wanted to know what multicultural classroom meant. And I saw that she preached that a lot. It was about the practice of freedom, which promotes growth. It was about the act of love, in that sense of love. It's about promoting spiritual and mental growth. And I thought this would be good for my students. This will be good for me as well, and to enable students to do well in my class. So what does courageous and compassionate pedagogy mean? From Bell Hooks' books, you can see things about paying attention to differences in learners and your colleagues and their abilities for them, in their abilities, their personal circumstances and trauma. I've also looked at trauma as a practice as well through the advanced HE. I've done a lot of CPDs with these groups of people. Appreciating cultural differences is very important. Who is in your classroom? What do they do? How do they nod for yes? Like the Indians nod with the side-to-side wave, but everybody else is nodding forward. You need to understand what they're telling you. So I prioritize listening to them, acknowledge and share authentic experiences, my own lived experiences with them, and I acknowledge their previous experiences to improve, the applications of critical pedagogy, which I got to know about in my PhD, but also to pull down that curtain, that hierarchy, that power dynamics, and to create space for them to feel included in what we are doing. So the multicultural classroom framework is still in development, but it may look like this when it is finished. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because I've talked about it. So these are when I say CPD, these are the kind of books I read to help me understand more about this work. So the teaching techniques and tools that I take on is mainly a blended learning approach to teaching. And there are so many aspects to it, which you can see on this section, which has all the kind of tools that I may bring into classroom, things like flipped classroom, problem-based learning, and using online resources like video to get students to watch something before they come to class, answer some questions and come to me with it. And then we come into class, sometimes watch the videos using a 3-2-1 conversational approach where you will ask them questions. What are the 3 things you see from important about this video? What are the 2 things you can take away and 1 way you can practice? So it's very, very practical. And then there are some individual and independent group-based assessment. Their assessment is actually mostly group-based. And I randomly assign students to these groups so that we can work together through formative assessments using different skills and including mentoring and coaching to enable them. So what I want to see at the end of the day is proper self-directed students that have developed self-directed learning when they come to me before they go anywhere else, to enjoy to becoming lifelong learners, but also mainly to promote personal growth and professional development. These are some of the tools, but I'm not going to talk a lot about the tools, but I think one of the things I like the most is the positive affirmation. Whether they are doing well or they're not doing well, I tell them they can. It's something that you can do. I invest in their emotional bank account. They can trust me. They can feel that they matter to me. But I think one of the ones I introduced this year is the improv from a theater where when a student answers question, I get all the students to put their hand on their jaw like this and say, wise. and the students, you can just see the students just swell up and be proud and be bold and be happy that he or she has been validated, their points have been validated. So if you resonate with this issue, you say, wise. It's fun. Yeah, it's fun. And the students love it. So it's a practice of love, freedom, and through the blended approach to learning. So adopting this critical and compassionate pedagogical framework allows for deeper exploration of, cultural context and emphasizes empathy and understanding and fostering a safe space for my students to learn. They love it. They begin, you can see they begin to form friendships that you never imagined will happen. I genuinely love my students and I want to see them succeed. So over time, working with them working with diverse students, mature students, international students, and neurodiverse students, I've been able to sense when things are not right with them. I ask them, how are you? What's happening with you these days? And I see them outside and inside. We talk like friends. So I celebrate them, to be honest. I integrate study skills in my work. I work with them as partners. I can't see you. How many minutes?
5 minutes to go. Thank you.
Okay, so I acknowledge them, but I do this in a very authentic way. So you can say that I am very approachable. So I'm practicing what Bell Hooks and Paula Freire have both invited me to do. I do this a lot. So what does practice of freedom means? And love means once in a while, I take your tutti, because I have a bunch of tutti students also from the master's class. I do the tripartite. I have one-to-one coaching and I eat with them, take them to the canteen once in a while and just have fun with them. I'm not going to be able to share this video, but if you can hear it, it's the way I use the Kahoots in class. It's fun. Students get engaged in what I'm doing. I walk around the room. I touch them, how you doing? What's happening to you? They're answering the questions and they are having fun. I'm going to move on. I'm sure the slides will be shared to you so you can see my YouTube videos. So I make learning very fun and it enhances engagement. Students learn self-leadership and emotional intelligence. So these are some of the things I have in my class, in my course content. They learn the culture of respect. They have leadership competencies to learn, and all this kind of effective engagement with each other and connecting with the health determinants that they need to be studying as well. So my findings reveal, or when students give me feedback, the feedback reveal positive experiences with the multicultural training. They report confidence, improved confidence to engage in conversations, stronger critical thinking, stronger reflective essays that I see my lecturers, when they mark with me, they say, oh my goodness, these two students have really applied their knowledge to work. I think what I love the most is the positive relationship that they build. and the increased sense of community of learners. We're talking about leadership as if they were discussing. But the highlight of it is that I hardly have a fail in my class, especially in the PSC, which is a smaller class. I have 100% pass rate, and it's usually between mainly 2-1s to first class. And for the MSc, maybe 1 or 2 people giving me 98% pass rate. So these are some of the outcomes for the quantitative results that I get, the impact on grades. So fostering critical thinking would mean something like they felt very relaxed. It was positive an environment for learning, and I felt able to say what I wanted to say without judgment. That means a lot to me. When they're asked about what they feel, this is some of the things they say. Their emotional intelligence is increased. They understand how to work with other people from different backgrounds and beliefs. And it was fun to learn from them. They say they are now my friends. If you look at them, most of them are talking about work and how they go on. I think one of the highlights of my feedback is when students say I'm approachable. How is everything going? You know, the student asks me, and speaking in pidgin English, they tell me about their experience of getting an 80%, an international male student, and then the psychological safety. When they come to me in class, they're very unsafe, they're not confident, but they feel free to talk in my class. The highlight of it is for my graduation ceremony when all of them want to take pictures with me. I really enjoy seeing them. To conclude, I believe that to truly address inequalities in education and ensure student success, we need to shift the dial from just the banking methods of education to a more inclusive teaching and learning practice. I think that I would be thinking about my aim and future direction will be to co-create learning research with my students, and I've started to do that already, and get funding to advance the multicultural classroom methodology. I'm planning to publish some articles, and I've already started doing podcasts and vodcasts to show my learning. And finally, I just want to acknowledge all the teachers who made me hate maths, and also BSc and MSc students who have been so good in adopting and taking in and sucking in my kind of teaching. Anthony Hill, my Dean of Teaching and Learning, who's very, very supportive of my work. And Kim, my Director of Teaching and Learning, who's my line manager. And they constantly and consistently support me to do the best I can. So thank you for listening. This is if you use the QR code, you will go to a current video podcast that I was interviewed by the Director of Teaching and Learning in my college. And that's my email address. I would really, really love to connect with as many people who are interested in understanding and knowing my work better. Thank you so much for listening. I can hear you clapping.
Okay, we've got again 5 or 6 minutes. Maybe if you're going to ask a question, if you could come over here a bit closer to the microphone, that'd be great. Louise, I saw your arm, but it's going to know. Yeah.
Do you want me to unshare my screen, or it's okay?
How do you make myself listen?
I could do that, couldn't I? There you go.
I think you put that stage.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, thank you so much. It's really interesting for me because I found this, I think you're very brave because I'm scared of doing this. And I think I've taught in high schools as well. And I've even taught children, very, very young children. And when you become an academic, you know, the expectations change. And so the teacher in you is supposed to kind of hide away, and you go into these very serious persona driven by your intellectual capabilities, etc. And so have you found resistance from colleagues when they see the way you're teaching? Because we associate that, to all the types of education, and I think we are losing some of our students because we're not doing what you're doing.
Thank you for that question. It's really emotional for me, because this is exactly my experience with other lecturers. It's sometimes overt and sometimes it's covert. And sometimes it's just students, because students, especially my tripartite students, they're very bold. They go into their meetings and they say, oh my goodness, why is Ife the last teacher we get in our third year? She should be number one. She should be in the beginning. And I think some of my students, my lecturers are really, what do you do in your class? You know, right from 9 years, my whole 9 years of teaching, there's challenges, people wanting to bring me down, people wanting to sack me. I've had line managers who's like, what do you think you're too much? Why is everyone caring about how you teach or what you teach instead of adopting what I'm teaching? And that's why I acknowledge my line manager and my this college dean of teaching and learning, because they've enabled me to be myself. They're just like, wow, this is good, you know. And this is, I get a lot of microaggression as a Black woman. I get a lot of some side talk and some kind of, you know, I see sometimes colleagues in corridors when they are talking, you know, it's like, you know, it's I can't describe how I feel. Even from white students, to be honest, they challenge my method. So, for instance, I decided to incentivize people for doing my work, for doing the work before they come into class, because only 2 students did the work. And I'm like, on Sunday, I'm writing an email saying, if you don't do the work by the time I see you on Monday, we're not going to really enjoy the class work. And 28 people did it. So I was so happy. I took 2, it was around Christmas, and I took celebrations and 2 big buckets of chocolate. And I said, if you did my work, come and have some chocolate. If you didn't do my work, come and have, 2, I gave 2. I couldn't tell you more about what I do in class, because there's a lot. 20 minutes is not enough. I gave chocolates to the class, gave 2 chocolates to the 2 people who did it the first time, and I got reprimanded for it. I get reprimanded for saying, last year I got 100% in BSc. This year I want to get 100% from you guys. I need you to work with me, to work alongside, and it will come into the report that students are complaining that I'm putting pressure on them to pass. And they will say it's not to the benefit of the students. I think the lecturer wants to get some accolade for doing well. But I think it's not a student language. I think it's the interpretation of whoever is writing that report. I've had it 2 years in a row now since I've been in this current job. But this job has also given me flexibility to do this, because previously people wouldn't even employ me. Once they see me teaching like this, they will not even give me a job. They will not employ me because they will say, oh, she's coming to come and shine, or she's pretending, or that. But you know what? I just ignore it and I carry on, because I know that what I'm doing is the best. I enjoy it, and I feel that some students will enjoy it. And majority of the students give me hugs, tell me they love me, give me standing ovation in class. And that just gives me, in class and even in canteen when they see me and they're all together, they just get up and give me a hug. I have pictures. Some of the pictures you see are students wanting to take pictures with me everywhere I go. So that gives me courage to go on.
Let's do one more question.
Yes.
There you go.
Dr. Dan-Ogosi, thank you so much. I love your outfit. And,
thank you.
I love also your presentation. I want to say that listening to you, I found myself immersed in what you're doing, because I am a PhD candidate, and I had the opportunity to teach in one of the university in across close to London, and actually I use one of your method. But in terms of giving to go and to the canteen and share pizza, I think that if you were to use those students to bring something, dishes from their respective country, and to share among them, I think that it would bring another impact into the bond between them. This is just a suggestion I was giving.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I do that as well. I make jollof rice and I bring jollof rice.
Thank you.
If you look at my LinkedIn profile, you will see some of the enjoyments or things we do together. We have potluck lunch as a group for the whole master's program, and I'm the one who brings the jollof rice. With this year, another colleague joined me and said, "Ify, we need to bring some jollof rice," and we did it together.
I will be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Please follow me on follow the YouTube QR code, and you see some more reasons why I decided to teach the way I teach, and it's coming. We're going to have a series of that as well as a vodka. So thank you so much for your questions and your comments.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cool.
Thanks so
Right.
much for being there.
Next up,
Thank
we've
you.
got Hardeep and Hooley. Hardeep and Zara.
Is you? Yes. Perfect. This should work. Yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dr. Hardeep, Basra, and I'm an associate professor at the Montfort University in Leicester, and myself and my colleague Zara. Zara, do you want to introduce yourself now?
Yep, yeah, I'm Zara Hooley. I'm also a senior lecturer at the MU. I'm a sociologist by trade, but I'm also comment with the
Yeah, so at the Montfort University, I am the inclusive education lead, so I lead the strategic work around developing inclusive language. And quite fitting in terms of what the name of this conference is, Reimagining Higher Education. I actually have designed and I do lead a module called Reimagining Higher Education, addressing inequality and social justice in higher education. So this is like, I don't know, I mean, some of us know that this is really my bag. Yeah. I'd just like to take a moment to thank the presenters before me. Absolutely applaud the work that they're doing and the philosophy and principles behind that work, because that impulses everything we are doing at the MU and centres what I do. The compassionate pedagogy is what I'm also all about. But here today, what we're going to do is we're going to share a little bit about our overview and our work that we've done to decolonisation. So as opposed to the two presenters that went before me who talked about particular units of work that they lead, okay, the approach we've taken at university is actually we need to look at the whole institution. We can't just look at ourselves in the mirror, okay? We have got to look at the whole institution and how the institution operates. So not just what we teach, how we teach, and not just from the student perspective, but also from the staff perspective. So we've kind of looked at the whole DNA of the university, okay? And that's what this project was about. It was about looking at the lived experience of both staff and students, and looking at lots of data, okay, in terms of what our students are performing, but also how staff are performing, and to think about how we can support colleagues, okay, in that decolonising agenda. And we're not just talking about academic colleagues here, we are talking about colleagues who also work within the professional services context, and not just professional services who are supporting learning and teaching, everybody. Okay, so if you're in the finance department or the HR department, actually the reach and work is really, really important, because you're interacting with colleagues constantly, and those individuals are from multicultural backgrounds. We'll talk about how we're trying to embed this work as business as usual. So inevitably it started off as a whole institutional project, and with most projects, the funding eventually comes to an end and you have to embed it. Zara will then move on looking at some of the development approaches that we have developed out of this project. So just to give you a bit of context, if we didn't know a bit about DMU, we're extremely diverse, probably one of the most diverse cities outside of London. Okay, and this is really important in the context of our students, but also in the context of our staff as well. So we're very, very diverse in terms of the students we recruit, and we also have a significant diversity amongst our staff population as well. Just to give you a little bit of context about who our students are, I won't go through all of this detail, but it kind of tells you actually the work that we're doing around this is imperative because our students require us to be inclusive because of the range of different intersectional lenses we are recruiting students from. And it's also a key strategic priority at this university. So empowerment. Okay, I think one of the things I can say really, I'm really proud about where Zara and I are working at the moment. We are empowered to do this work. We are given, we don't have to ask permission. Actually, go deliver this, go challenge, go disrupt, be that change agent. And that's really refreshing because we're not doing it as individuals, we're doing it collectively as an institution. So we do have what we call the Empowering University Strategy, which is our whole arching strategy for the institution. We also have our Quality for All, and we also have the Race Quality Charter. So DMU was the first university to achieve silver status. So we were the first university to be able to get the Advanced HE Race Quality Charter. And that's a reflection of not just the work that we have done to date, but the work we have committed to do over the next 5 years. So, and we also have the access participation plan, and we have, say newly, it's been about a year now, okay, we've got a newly educational unit called the DMU Education Academy, which is where I work and currently Zara is seconded into. I won't go into this into too much detail because I think colleagues before me have already paid lip service to it, but why is it important? Why is it really important how we are achieving decolonisation and why we're driving that particular work? And although this an important point I want to make, this work really started off being race at the centre, okay, but we've really found some of the key principles and theories, okay, and the drivers behind this work really help promote the needs of a variety of students, whether it be international students, whether it be students who have got a declared disability, neurodiverse students, students with, you know, thinking about gender identity and sexual orientation, that in terms of, although a lot of the work is centered around race, this work is really about inclusivity as a whole. Okay, but race work has allowed us to have the principles to have those conversations within race, but beyond too. So a lot of the work, although this project is known as an anti-racist institutional project, has really transcended into looking at the issues of inclusivity across the campus. So we do have a working position, which you can find on that link before. And it kind of guides the work that we're doing. Okay, we are trying to, it's about decentering that knowledge. Okay, something that the first presenter, Alison, spoke about, but also what the second presenter talked about as well. And doing this in all aspects of our work, not in terms of what we teach. This is not just about classroom interaction. It's how we are interacting with students outside the classroom, but also how we are interacting with colleagues. Okay. You know, it's very unfortunate to hear about some of the negative experience that the second presenter had felt, but we hear those stories all the time. Okay, but we are actually trying to empower colleagues to do that, to challenge and to engage in that kind of work, and you know, make them brave in doing so. So the way that the project worked, we have 5 strands. Okay, so we looked at institution. So we are looking at very high level policies and strategies. So what is the institution doing in terms of driving this anti-racist work forward? Okay, we're looking at staff. Okay, so this is looking at what support are staff being given. And again, remember, this is not just in the context of learning and teaching, it's all staff. Okay, so what are we doing in terms of training staff around this, around race literacy, and quite difficult, quite uncomfortable conversations sometimes. What does this mean in terms of student outcomes? What does this mean in terms of staff? We've only got 1 Black female professor. Okay, so we haven't got it right. Okay, but we are scrutinising and trying to hold the university accountable where outcomes do not seem to be equitable and fair. And this project enabled us to be able to have those conversations in a safe space. We also have a student strand, and that was really important because we employed we had in total 180 student leaders. So that student voice is absolutely critical. It's not about us trying to assume what students want or don't want, how they feel or how they don't feel. It was really about hearing from the students themselves and facilitating those students to have the conversations and much more locally. Okay, so not senior leaders going into talking, but getting students to hold those conversations with module teams and program teams, and that was really critical. And actually, that was really empowering because if you're trying to convince people further up, data is one thing, but when you can hear the voices and lived experience of students, that's very difficult to challenge. Okay. Research. So this is another area. So position. We talk about positionality, and we try to unpick biases that do occur within undertaking supervision, but also within supervision relationships between students and supervisors as well. And lastly, we did have a colleague who also worked on library and looking at that diversification, I suppose, is what was mentioned at the beginning. So as part of the team, we've been running. Well, we started back in 2017, okay, and this work continues. We've had a lot of staff involved in this. So we created roles called Fair Outcomes Champions. These were seconded roles where staff are not expected to do it within their workload. They were brought out, and anything between 0.2 to 1.5, depending on what they meant to. And these were staff who were from both academic and professional services. So we did have a balance. I think in total, or on balance, we probably had about 60% academic staff and about 40% from the professional services. And like I said, we had 180 student leaders who are all paid for their work, and we worked very closely with the DSE. In terms of what's governing this work now, okay, we do have a PVC work actually quite uniquely. We've got education and equality together, not separate, but together. It's under the same portfolio, which is quite different in a lot of other senior structures and institutions. We also have an EDI team which is driving this work forward, and we do have a race equality action, which I chair portion. This action plan's got probably about 185 actions in it. So we're committed to a hell of a lot. We're probably about midway, and we're making good progress. Okay? But the advantages of having it within an action plan is that you've already committed. Okay? So you do have that institutional buy-in to be able to deliver on those commitments. And I should have put the Athena's one. There's also a lot of gender-related quality actions within the Athena's one as well. So I did mention that the fact that we did get the silver award for the Race Equality Charter. We also did win the Advanced HE Collaborative Award, and this is because of the nature in which we have been able to deliver this work. Rather than to be a few individuals kind of having a top-down approach, this project was really organic and involved, bottom-down, bottom, top, sideways. Everybody was really involved, and our commitments now are broken down to these 4 areas: equality of education and research, and that's the area that I particularly chair. Progression, talent, and education. That is really focusing on staff progression, okay? Whereas student progression is under equality of education. We've got governance and accountability, and culture and behaviour. As part of the project, we have produced a lot of resources to be able to help support bedding this project as business as usual. So we've got the decolonising toolkit, which Zara would go into a bit more detail. But we also do have an externally facing website, which has all the resources that we've created over the last 5 years on this particular project that will give you a lot more insight And what we've tried to really focus is this practical strategy. Because we speak to a lot of colleagues who say to us, I buy into this. I want to be able to do this, but how do I do it? Is that those practical things? Okay, and that is a lot of the work that we're involved in. A lot of the work that we do is going to work with individual module teams, program teams, or individual lecturers to be able to empower and enable them to do this. So we've already had 2 great presentations from colleagues who've already showcased how they've been able to do that. But many of the conversations we have with colleagues, I don't know how to do this. I don't know what that means in the context of my subject discipline. Can you help facilitate that? And that is a lot of the work that I'm involved in, but there are resources and toolkits being produced to be able to facilitate that work as well. I'll hand over to Zara, who will talk a bit about some of those resources.
Yeah. So one of the challenges is the move to business as usual. So obviously you can see with the kind of huge project that has gone before, it's been very well funded. So we're now moving into a phase where it's looking at, okay, so if we don't have lots of employed students, we don't have lots of employed staff, how do we continue the momentum? But the other thing is also the legacy resources that we've got, how do we keep those up to date and that sort of stuff. So this is the Decolonising DMU toolkit, and this is a sector share. So you can access this. We just search Decolonising DMU, this is the first thing that comes up. That's fairly easy to find. And this is what my role, I'm in the process of kind of updating this material. So you can expect this to change quite a lot over the next few months. And in this, you can kind of go in and look at different things. But what I'm going to do, I think, is I'm going to, as I've only got 5 minutes left, I'm going to talk about the staff development unit we're designing. So this is one of the ways in which we're going to continue to embed decolonising as a practice across DMU. And that is to have this staff development unit that all students, that all staff are going to engage with. We can't make it mandatory, but we have it built into certain processes like the academic enhancement review, which is like our data-driven review process. So one of the actions from that could be that team, a programme team, is going to get their staff to engage with this. So this is structured as a questionnaire at the beginning to try and work out what units will be most useful. We all know, we've all done those kind of mandatory health and safety training things where we're really clicking through it as quickly as we can. We're trying to avoid that sort of approach. We're trying to say, okay, so are you someone who supports students? You don't necessarily have to be in a teaching role to do that. Then perhaps focus on the decolonising student support. So that unit focuses on things like one-to-one encounters with students, or are you perhaps a teaching and learning member of staff, in which case you might want to look at decolonising the curriculum, or are you in professional services? Obviously, you could be doing student support and professional services, lots of roles are like that. So the quiz at the beginning, point staff, right, focus on unit 1 and unit 3. If you're not doing research, then don't focus on that unit. So, and what staff will do is they will work through the most appropriate units. They will complete the unit by doing an action plan, and the action plan will be submitted, and that will go, a copy of that will go to the inclusive education team, which gives us a way to kind of close the loop. So, okay, you did this unit, you said you were going to do these things. In a year's time, we should have the data then to go back to them and say, did you do any of these things? And by completing the unit, completing the action plan, they will get a digital badge. And that kind of gets us along the road to maintaining those kind of champions across the institution. I'm also going to share this. So if you've got a smartphone or you've got anything with you, you can scan that QR code. What I've actually done, this is going to be an internal facing unit, but for the purposes of this session, I've kind of put that on a public server so you can have a look at it. It's built on, I don't know if you've come across Articulate Rise, it's built on that platform for now, but it's going to be embedded in our BLE. So this has got I've chosen a couple of units, it's not got the whole thing, but so you can have a look at that. If you get any time today, just have a little scroll through that, and if you want to give us any feedback, it's in development at the moment, so that's what we're kind of working on. I'm going to go back to this slide then, if we've got a few minutes. Brilliant. Okay. So this is looking at the business as usual. So how do we move from this idea of this kind of big project into business as usual? So there's various things that we've done at DMU. One is this building of this staff learning unit. And just to say as well around that, Hardeep kind of alluded to this, but my background is actually in kind of LGBTQ plus inclusion. I've published on that. And what we experienced by looking closely at the decol stuff, in fact, I'll go through to this, is that there's an awful lot of similarities between decolonising principles and things like universal design for learning, which is obviously about kind of making learning accessible to everyone, including people who've got disabilities or who are neurodivergent, but also trauma-informed pedagogy. So one of the things that LGBTQ learners, the literature shows on LGBTQ learners, is that they're not less likely to do well, though there are some categories within that umbrella which are less likely to do well, but they are more at risk of mental health difficulties and microaggressions and disruption with family origin. So there's lots of reasons why we may want to be structuring our learning slightly differently, or certainly accommodating those kind of learners in a slightly different way. But what we found by looking at the decolonising principles is that a lot of the principles are the same. So thinking about the previous speakers who talked about this, bringing your whole self to the classroom as an educator and talking about positionality. So who you are and what you're doing, why you're there, kind of what your thought processes are around the material that you're interacting with, your positionality, and encouraging students to do the same. That is as good for LGBTQ plus learners as it is for learners from global majority backgrounds and everybody. So there's lots of things that are similar. Also thinking about your environment, so your role models, the staff role modeling, and also images, source materials such as reading lists, etc., etc. And I often think it's quite interesting. We talk about people like in sociology, we talk about people like Foucault, we talk about bell hooks, and these are queer people, but we never mention that. And that is the same in many ways as a kind of whitewashing reading list. So if we apply these principles more broadly, not because race is not important, race is extremely important, but we can be building kind of a more inclusive curriculum for everybody. So these are some of the things that we've kind of drawn together as the project has matured. So I think I'll stop there. I did want to talk about that, but I think we'll try.
Yeah, we've run out of time. Thank you very much. That's great. Right, questions? Alison?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I guess in our project, we're trying to move forward as well. But how do you balance because I find the people who are you're interested in stuff and the people who are kind of doing it, right? They're sort of engaged echo chamber. How do you get outside of that to the people who are saying at the most extreme level, which we have, I don't agree with decolonisation, or even just the people who are in the middle saying, not really sure I want to get involved in this, regardless of why.
Two examples. We have a postgraduate certificate in higher education. Ours is called postgraduate certificate in higher education. And that module that I've led and created, the Reimagining higher education in addressing inequality is compulsory. They have to be. So new members of staff that come to the NU, they are familiarised with that concept of work right from the beginning. So they're not unlearning to learn again. That's part of their new learning. And as part of that particular module, they have to design an adventure. And the vast majority go in. So for them, it becomes, it's normal, not something that's having to unlearn and then learn. That's one way. Other way that we're doing it in terms of strategic change is, as Zara alluded to, we have an annual enhancement review process. Okay, they all have to be part of their annual. It's like your annual program. Every university is slightly different. They have to produce an action, and on the action plan, they have to produce actions in relation to addressing the awarding gap, if there's retention. So, if there's anything in their data that shows there's some kind of issue in terms of student outcomes, student experience, which might be related to a range of different things, such as race, ethnicity, gender, disability, they have to produce an action. And that's where we try to support them and say what practices we can do. So we go in with a very compassionate, constructive, developmental arm saying, okay, we can see that this is an action plan. what can we do to help support? And that's been in here in the case for about a year or so, and that has worked reasonably well. Because you're not going there and well, it's busy being bad, trying to do something bad. We're like, actually, here, we're trying to, I suppose, it's how we position it. We're positioning is an opportunity. Let's try something different. Okay. I'm not saying everybody gets to do it. I'm not saying that you always have an arm of resistance somewhere. But I think if you kind of go in and look and then help support, that is helping. Zara, you want to add anything to that?
Well, just I think it's baked in. So that's kind of what this was around is the fact that it's baked in on different levels. It's baked in at an institutional level with the AER, our data reporting processes and how programs are held accountable. So I think it that leads to the action. So I think if it isn't baked into your processes, if people don't have to report on it, so if they're not held accountable, why is there a reporting gap in your subject area? Then I think at DMU, I don't think we've got anybody who's anti. I think we've got a lot of people who think it's not my problem. It's not my priority. Not a lot of people. I shouldn't say that because actually we are quite far along the project, but we still have a reporting gap.
Yeah.
So we, it's not job done.
It's about trying to make sure that everybody's accountable. Everybody's accountable.
Yeah.
Not just module leaders, not just senior leaders. Everybody has to have a part to play and it's about helping them understand what that role is, whether they're professional services or whether they're in that's that total shift that we're trying.
Okay, I saw a hand over here.
Yes, Jonathan from Advanced AG. I think it's a similar sort of question, but seeing the materials, they looked for stuff that looked much more engaging than when you may join a new company. You might see these shelf-board sorts of IT questions. So how do you make sure? How do you get people aware of them that they're there, but they're not? But how does the process work? So I guess it goes through HR induction and so on.
Get HR process. I can't. We're not allowed to. You'll be told no, you can't sit in mandatory training. You're not allowed. It's not a legal requirement. Unlike health and business. But we can use the filing record. And we do have it built into processes. So someone's going to take a photo foundation. One of the questions on the quality checklist is what portion of the staff have engaged with the legal work. So we can actually encourage some make doing. But this unit, the one that Zara has been designed, we officially launched on the 8th of July. The toolkit exists and the toolkit has been in existence since 2022. But the unit is there. And it's more cases, we've had a lot of success with the postgraduate module on addressing inequality. So we needed a lighter version, because that is a level 7. It also does require a high level of caliber engagement, but we needed a lighter version, which is what this module.
This could be done by academic staff, but it could be done by someone working in service or somebody working in catering. So we can't assume a degree level prior background to the materials. And in fact, some of the feedback I've had from colleagues is that it's still pitched a bit high, potentially. It's a really difficult market, isn't it? You've got professors, to people who perhaps have no post-school, post-compulsory education schooling. So, but I'm hoping the digital badge might be appealing. I know that sounds a bit like, why they going to want brownie badges, but actually, they do seem to love a badge, don't they? And people like to put it on their LinkedIn and that kind of thing. And I think if we do an action plan, that's why I've tied it to an action plan that we can then follow up on. Because then hopefully it's not tokenistic. They've done the module, they've thought about how it applies to their area, they've done an action plan. And then as the Education Academy can then follow up with those people in a year or two, or, probably a year, I think, and say, okay, have you done any of this? You've got the badge and you're saying you're an advocate.
You say, what help do you need? Actually, here's a central resource. If you've got any challenges in implementing some of the actions you've identified, how can we help? How can you?
Yeah, move it sort of beyond the allyship, lip service sort of thing, what they were actually about. So.
Okay, thank you so much. Great, we've got Emma on employability in entrepreneurship. Do you remember where it was?
Do you send it?
Yeah, it's not good.
If you had it on the share, it might be this one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Cool. Okay.
Perfect.
There it is. Okay, that should be it. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for sticking around for the last presentation on this session. So my topic is slightly different from all of the ones before, but hopefully will still be interesting. I'm going to talk about increasing employability through entrepreneurial skills development, and I'm going to focus sort of on two things during my talk. First one is our approach to entrepreneurial skills development, and I'm going to sort of shed more light on that. And then I'm going to speak about specific programs that we develop for students in underrepresented backgrounds. My name is Emma. I'm part of King's Entrepreneurship Institute. We are part of the King's Business School, but we are an odd outlier in the sense that we serve the whole King's rather than just the business school. So sort of our remit is all 46,000 of King's students rather than the students from the business school. And this program is pretty much developed in the light of the whole King's rather than the business school as well. So why am I focusing on changing? So, yeah, if you just increase it a little bit. Okay. Perfect. So I'm going to talk about why am I talking about skills, why am I talking about entrepreneurial skills, and why am I talking about entrepreneurship in the first place. So as you probably are all aware, there has been a lot of talks about skills in the UK context lately, and sort of UK Parliament has talked about the basic skills that people can develop, literacy, numeracy, and stuff like that. Essential skills, which pretty much you will see align with what I'm thinking when I say entrepreneurial skills, which are sort of the transferable skills that students can develop or anybody can develop, which are around communication, team working, etc. And finally, there are sort of technical skills, which are more skill specific and which are not transferable in that way. So there's a strong emphasis on skills, and we know the skills are really, really important. Quite interestingly, especially with Gen Z, there's quite a lot of interest in entrepreneurship. So the latest report from Enterprise Nation showed that sort of 67%, almost 67% of Gen Zers are interested in starting their own business, whether it's a full-time business or a side hustle. But essentially, we have seen that increase in entrepreneurship, in interest in entrepreneurship altogether. From the employer's perspective, we have seen a lot of evidence that employers are interested in entrepreneurial skills such as team working, critical thinking, communication skills, and entrepreneurial skills more broadly. And that has been shown in a survey done by Chartered Institute a few years ago on a sample of employers. And we know from various other reports, and I have highlighted just one here, which is World Economic Forum skills report, sort of a lot of skills, although there might not be called entrepreneurial skills, align with entrepreneurial skills. And I have highlighted them here. So you can see that things such as resilience, flexibility, and agility, which is quite an important central part of entrepreneurship, have been highlighted as the skills that students need for the future of work. And according to a lot of research evidence, enterprise and entrepreneurship education is quite important in skills development when it comes to especially entrepreneurial skills. So if you're making the case for enterprise and entrepreneurship education, there's a lot of positive outcomes of that. And evidence suggests that there is perceived positive influence on employability of students through enterprise and entrepreneurship education. There's very limited amount of evidence so far. That's something that we are working on at Entrepreneurship Institute, sort of to strengthen this evidence base. But nevertheless, there is still some evidence of positive impact on employability. We know that there's quite a lot of evidence around sort of improved skills, knowledge, and attitudes towards venture creation and sort of increased interest in entrepreneurship as well. And we know through the evidence again that entrepreneurial skills and mindsets can be developed through different pedagogical interventions. And I have to emphasize predominantly we're thinking sort of about experiential learning methodology, so not traditional theoretical theory delivery based sessions, but experiential learning is shown to be have positive effects on entrepreneurial skills development. When it comes to King's approach for entrepreneurial skills development, we use our own framework, which is called 7 Skills of an Entrepreneurial Mindset. And essentially it was developed by my colleague Rachel Stocky, who is head of skills at Entrepreneurship Institute. And what she did is basically talk to almost 1,000 of people that are linked to Entrepreneurship Institute in some capacity, whether they're students, whether they're ventures that have gone through some of our programs, or whether they're people who are part of our ecosystem, and looked at what does it mean to be entrepreneurial and what makes entrepreneurs different. So what is it that makes entrepreneurial employees different compared to the bog standard employee, or however you want to call it, within an organization. And this framework underpins all of Entrepreneurship Institute programming, and we deliver things that are delivered as part of the curriculum, things that are co-curricular, and also sort of pieces of work that are fully extracurricular as well. Rachel wanted to make this framework relatively simple so students can understand it quite easily. So entrepreneurial skills are not something that is unimaginable and quite distant and alien to them. She wanted to put it in simple terms so it is understandable by everybody. And this is essentially the 7 skills that we are talking about. We are talking about compelling communication, which is linked to communication skill, getting things done, which is basically sort of personal effectiveness side of things, thinking lean, which is around lean startup methodology and things that how to apply that framework within the general employability work, general employment rather than just sort of startup framework. Validation, if you have a project idea, how do you get from it being idea to implementing it? Disruptive and creative thinking, which we have seen are quite important. Building teams, which is essentially around team working. And finally, commitment to growth, which includes the elements of resilience, it includes the elements of sort of being committed to sort of continuous development. And sort of when we design the programs, whether they're curricular or co-curriculars, these skills are embedded into those programs, making students develop in very compelling and different ways the entrepreneurial skills alongside. So I'm going to talk, as I said, about a specific program, which is a program that is called Game Changers. And the program was designed on the basis that a lot of individuals are facing quite a lot of barriers to entrepreneurship. We know that individuals are facing internal barriers to entrepreneurship, which are around sort of fear of failure, lack of confidence to engage in entrepreneurship, lack of motivation, often unsupportive networks if they haven't been exposed to entrepreneurship at all, but also some of the external barriers, which are lack of support, and especially financial support from state chambers of commerce or whoever else could be supporting their entrepreneurial activities. And we know that entrepreneurial opportunities and outcomes especially can be impacted by individuals' backgrounds, and specifically economic and ethnic backgrounds come into play when we talk about entrepreneurial opportunities. So the Game Changers program is a unique internship-like opportunity that is offered to King students. And essentially, it's the program that's designed for students of underrepresented backgrounds, whether they're undergrad, postgrad, or PhD students. And for 9 weeks over the summer, the last cohort started last week, they're paid to work on their entrepreneurial idea. So in the same way you would have a traditional internship, which is, for example, 20 hours a week for 9 weeks, or 20 hours a week for 9 weeks, they're paid to develop their own company, essentially. We obviously do this through the funding, and especially this program has been funded by donor funding so far. So we assess Game Changers programs through 2 means, essentially. We use for all of our programs assessment of skills development through pre and post surveys. And we can track on our map of 7 skills how much those skills changed over the program duration. But also for this particular program, we decided to do more in-depth evaluation. So I conducted semi-structured interviews with all program participants following the completion of the program. The results I'm reporting are obviously for the last year, but we're planning to extend this into the current year as well, and conduct more interviews and gather more data as well. So when it comes to skills development, it was quite interesting to look at how their skills changed throughout the program and which skills increased the most. So when it comes to lower increases, sort of about 11%, we had an increase in build teams. This is quite expected because students came from a variety of backgrounds, right? We had undergraduate or postgraduate students. They were likely to have been working in some context of team beforehand. It's probably the skill that they developed throughout their university journey, because we rarely had sort of students who are straight into the university. They at least, a lot of them were sort of the final years or postgraduate students as well. However, it's quite interesting that the more entrepreneurial skills of creating a disruptive thinking lean, so following that lean startup methodology and validations have increased enormously. And those are skills that probably students haven't encountered in their programs as much. So creative thinking was very much linked to them coming up with their own entrepreneurial ideas. They can go as wild as they can, in a sense that they can pitch to develop the company on whatever they want to, and they would get support from us for 9 weeks to do that. With thinking lean, they were highly encouraged to actually do their research, do the interviews, test their ideas, build minimum viable products, build prototypes of their products, and sort of develop it over a period of 9 weeks. So it's not theoretical, they had to work hard consistently to sort of develop that company and keep it going. And validation was around sort of mostly validating their ideas and the assumptions that they had around what they're building. So usually we would tell them to validate any problem that they're thinking they're solving for the members of society. And lots of the projects were sustainability focused, especially last year. And then also think about validation of the solution that they were developing as well. When it comes to the interviews, there are a number of themes that emerged from the interviews, and I broadly grouped them in 4 categories. I'm mostly going to talk about the first 3 because the 4th one is kind of boring and more technical in a sense that would help us to fine-tune the workshops that they were delivered in specific weeks. But essentially, they talked a lot about their motivation to join the program. They talked a lot about the skills development during the program. They talked quite a lot about exposure to entrepreneurship, which was for a lot of them first time that they were actually exposed to any entrepreneurial opportunities. And as I said, they spoke about program delivery, sort of which workshops they liked or disliked the most, which workshops were most useful, etc. So when it comes to motivations to join the program, a lot of them praised the uniqueness of the opportunity. Lots of the students were offered multiple opportunities over the summer. Some of them have declined their internships and decided to go for the Game Changers program. And this particularly stood out for me, where one participant said sort of, I will have the opportunity to do other internships, but I will probably never be paid again to work in my own company, which was sort of a testament of the uniqueness of opportunity. They have drive to focus on idea, a specific idea that they developed for the program, or to develop the pre-existing idea that they had. And lots of them sort of fine-tuned that idea over the course of the program. And also a lot of motivation came from the fact that this was a paid opportunity, because we were quite aware from the onset that students will have to engage in some sort of work during the summer, especially the students from underrepresented background. So sort of having this as a paid opportunity took the stress away of them having to pay additional paid opportunities. So a lot of them said sort of something along the lines, if it wasn't funded, I wouldn't be able to take part in this, although it would have been a great program. And also it made learning easier because they could focus on the program itself. When it comes to skills development, as we've seen, they did develop quite a lot of skills. Lots of them complemented that those are the skills that they weren't directly taught at the university, such as we saw the skills of research, methodology, or validation. They talked about transferability of the skills quite a lot. So a lot of them were saying that they decided to, after their studies, to become an entrepreneur or didn't, but lots of them said when they applied for jobs, they actually can use these skills later on. And one particular student spoke about sort of wanting to work in an international organization, but they said, sort of, these are the skills I will talk about when I come to an interview. And that was quite nice to hear and encouraging. And the framework used, the 7 skills with an entrepreneurial mindset, they found it quite encouraging and easy to use because it put a structure around entrepreneurial skills and it depicted it quite clearly for the students. And finally, exposure to entrepreneurship was quite an important part of the program. A lot of students had no exposure to entrepreneurship before they came onto the Game Changers program, or very little exposure to, for example, friends or classmates that have engaged in some sort of side hustle, but they weren't really a proper big entrepreneurial companies in any shape or form. And we had a lot of shifts in perceptions about entrepreneurship because, as this participant said, sort of before the program, they thought that was something that was reserved. Entrepreneurship was something that was reserved for people who have generational wealth and not something that is open to everybody, essentially, because they know that entrepreneurship is risky, it's costly at the beginning, and essentially this program took all of those stresses away, at least for those 9 weeks of the duration of the program. So to conclude, we need to talk about entrepreneurial skills because they're immensely important for student employability, and there is evidence that shows that, and we know that in the context of the UK, there is a lot of discussion around skills more generally. We know that there's a lot of barriers to entrepreneurship, both external and internal, and in the context of the project that I presented, it was built on sort of the conception that we need to take those barriers away and make sure that the students have exposure to entrepreneurship and can have a go at being entrepreneurial in a way, even if it's just for 9 weeks. So that was everything from me. Just some references, and of course, if you have any questions,